Good afternoon and welcome to a very special episode of Christ Today with Father Ray. In fact, this is the much anticipated 2022 holiday installment, where this year we'll be taking a look back at some of Father Ray's most inspirational and thought-provoking segments from the entire run of the series, some of our favorite moments. And we do hope that it provides as much inspiration today as it did back then, maybe even more. Well, without further ado, we're going to jump right into it because, as always, there's a lot of ground to cover. Well, charity and generosity, giving in general, it really does play a very central role in your life, and has for a very long time, clearly. If you wouldn't mind, please tell me about some of the groups that you currently support, or that you've supported in recent years, some of your favorite charities.
Well, you know, it's like sometimes I think people in general need some incentive for giving, and sometimes it involves a particular instance in their own life, a family member or whatever. And when my previous assignment was at Resurrection before I went to St. Joe Jasper, and we had Brock Hurdle, who went to St. Jude's, and they worked with him, and for a while they had his cancer in arrest, but then it eventually came back. The Benedictines and Franciscans were particular, I was kind to them too, because Mom had, my dad's oldest sister was a daughter of charity. So, we spent a lot of time with her, but also Mom had some cousins who were Benedictine and Franciscan sisters. So we would go to Oldenburg at least once a year to visit them.
Right.
Children from the area go to Riley Hospital in Indianapolis. So that's a particular charity. St. Meinrad, I spent 12 years there, because when I went there, they had a high school, college, 4 years of high school, 4 years of college, 4 years of theology. So I'm what they call a lifer there, because I spent that much time in schooling there.
Right.
I worked with the Sisters of Providence in my first assignment, which was in St. John's Lagodi. And so they were teaching in the school there. And then all my brothers and my sister spent some time at Mater Dei High School.
Right.
So that's one of the Catholic high schools in our territory. So those are my connections with those basic charities, that I support.
Right. Well, you've certainly never shied away from promoting yourself as a vehicle to advance these organizations, putting yourself at the center of things, be it an event, fundraisers, things like that, press releases, news articles, things of that nature, to encourage people to donate to these causes. But you mentioned a moment ago that sometimes people do require a little bit of a push. What would you say is the most effective way to inspire charitable activity in people who are otherwise not inclined that way?
Yeah, well, somehow you need to kind of get the message out there as far as the good that they do in the community. And, some of these organizations have a visible presence in the sense of the people that they have helped.
Right.
Plus the fact that they raise funds for, a van or something like that. They transport people to and from these particular places. But, like I said, of course, some of the religious orders are having problem recruiting members now because of the fact that, there aren't as many of them, and they're not in the schools like they used to be. sort of inspire people.
Right.
Some kind of presence, I think, that inspires people to give.
What do you think God's take is on it in terms of how does God feel about the vandals and the people who are causing such trouble?
Well, I think, kind of with the sense of the sense of shootings, sometimes these are health issues, racism, but also, they reflect the sinfulness of the human person.
Right.
And the fact that, people might say, why doesn't God stop all this? Well, that would be taking away the free will that we were created with.
Right.
And so, it's like we want to do our own thing so often.
Yes.
And some people, just go a little bit overboard on that, I think.
Now let me ask you, have we as a society and a culture been guilty of worshiping or following false idols who've led us astray? For example, celebrities, media and internet companies and personalities, politicians, etc.
Our society and our culture is filled with false idols. Power, greed, control, self-satisfaction, self-gratification. We've got a lot of false heroes. Our media and our internet can be helpful in so many ways, but they can also be harmful and slanderous. We just really need to look at all of this. Sometimes watching those who become heroes on TV, the persons and the personalities that they represent seem to me to be very false idols to follow.
Right. No sooner did COVID restrictions end than we're now faced with a potential world war. At the very least, we're looking at a global power shift and an obvious humanitarian crisis. People long for simpler times, I think. Are there any parts of the Bible that we can relate to these challenging times?
I had a professor in the seminary who said that World War III would come about when all the people who remember the past ones are gone. And we're about to the point of making that come true. It was a shocking experience a few years ago to visit the prison camps at Birkenau, Auschwitz, where, Maximilian Kolbe, one of the great saints of our century, was killed. To see there were rooms that were full of hair, full of suitcases, cooking utensils, because people were told to bring everything that they could possibly need to start a new life. And some people were marched directly from the trains to the gas chambers where they were killed. I'm at the age where I can relate to simpler times in our own country. I think the New Testament contains a lot of challenging times for people who live in the days of Jesus.
If Jesus were physically walking the earth today, what do you think he would make of all of this? What would he change? How could he help?
But you know what he told his disciples? If they will not accept you in a place, shake the dust from your feet and move on. And I think, if he were physically walking the earth today, he would be tempted to shake the dust off his feet and abandon us. But at the same time, he would also say, that's why I came in the first place, is to save the people. So while on the one hand, he might be wanting to shake the dust from the feet, yet that's the reason he came in the first place.
Recently, Pope Francis said that he embraces, and I quote, a utopianism that is not grounded in violent struggle, but in a deeply Christological hope for the transformation of people and communities from the bottom up. My question is, do you think it's possible to achieve this without promoting directly or indirectly a political ideology?
Well, it has to be from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
Starting with, the common folks,
in our beliefs and what we push for and what we hold on to. I'm not sure what this political ideology would be like, or an agenda or political bias. And one thing too, there are some people who listen closely to every word that Pope Francis says, and there are others who say, well, he has to make those statements. We're as divided on that as we are on practically every other issue.
Critical race theory, also known as CRT, is now being implemented into schools all over the country, with many people claiming that it has less to do with equality and more to do with division and even racism against everyone involved. Does this sort of thing, in your estimation, continue to divide us?
Well, I won't venture to guess how God feels about all of this, but
right.
We are in very confusing times. There's no question about that. I may step on some toes in saying this, but it's like it's almost square to be straight. Young kids getting to determine which gender they choose. Just a lot of things are really changing. All of this stuff gets very confusing to kids. Of course, there's more and more of it today, and I don't have a problem with that. I've worked in the areas when I was working construction before I was ordained. One section of Evansville was very heavily populated with biracial marriages. But people need to be aware of the problems that exist with this division, with racism and all of that.
So who decides where the line is drawn? At what point does God's will become man simply taking liberties for God?
I have maintained for years that in the Bible it says God created humanity in his image and likeness, and that ever since then humanity has tried to create God in our image and likeness. So we've tried to make God whatever we want it to be in so many circles of society. With regards to our mores, our values, people interpret it so differently from the way it has traditionally been. But in regards to the church's interpretation of the Bible, I don't see it changing because of the fact that they have so many scholars who study the backgrounds, work with it, and in individual forms as far as the Bible is concerned. Humanity has tried to take over God's will and the interpretation of the Bible, but the Bible will still continue to stand firm.
Well said. So many would say that America is more divided now than ever before, as we sort of touched on a few minutes ago. So do you think there's any healing this rift, this chasm between people? If so, how?
Well, we're basically a selfish nation. People are focused on themselves and what makes them happy.
Right.
And I don't think that that's going to change anytime soon. I think a lot of it has to do with, respect for life in general, from conception to natural death. Once we learn to treat each other as brothers and sisters, that is the only healing, I think, that is going to take place. But where to begin? These riots have not proven to settle anything. Looting, destroying the property, that will continue. The wars, we're pulling out of other countries, and we have problem healing our own country. It's when we begin to respect one another is when it's really going to take place.
Is the sinfulness of what's going on in America right now greater than it was, 20, 30, even 50 years ago?
I would say yes, because of the decline in mores and values of what's really considered important. We lived in much simpler times 50 years ago. People had a lot less to deal with, had a lot less to do with, and that sort of thing. And so I think all of that's compounded today. I did write a prayer, and I will read that. Creator God, when you made the world, you declared that it was good, and you promised you would never destroy it again after the great flood. Now we live in a messed up world with wars, uprisings, interior conflicts, and diseases. Heal our troubled world and send your blessings on our nation and on our world, and make it well again. We ask this now in Jesus' name. Amen.